Shalom and welcome to Genesis chapter 21, the truth about the book of Genesis revealed. There are 34 verses in this chapter, and we're looking at differences, small and big, but significant ones. Verse 6, we see the first one here. Jehovah has made laughter for me, for whoever shall hear shall rejoice with me, versus whoever will hear will laugh with me. Just a slight difference of wording there. Verse 7, who shall say to Abraham that Sarah suckles a child? For I have borne a child in my old age, versus a son in his old age. To be honest, it wouldn't matter how old Abraham is. It matters how old Sarah is. So, for example, if she was 25, and we know she wasn't, she was well into her, I believe, 80s, it wouldn't be a factor. So that's why in the Septuagint it makes more sense that in my old age, because Abraham could be, again, 100, 90, could be any age. Men are typically fertile their whole life, for most of their lives. Women tend to stop giving birth around the midpoint of life. So that's important to notice there. Verse 9, this is the big verse. This is the centerpiece of this video. It says here, verse 9, Sarah saw the son of Hagar, who was Ishmael, sporting with Isaac, her son. In the MT, it says mocking. What does that mean, sporting, mocking? Some say that he was sexually molesting him, but that's speculation. That is wild speculation. So what we must do is look at other texts and see if we can find anything from there. So in the book of Jubilees, chapter 18, verse 4, it says here that Sarah saw Ishmael playing and dancing, and Abraham rejoicing very greatly. And she was jealous of Ishmael, and she said to Abraham, drive out this girl and her son, because the son of this girl will not inherit with my son, Isaac. So that's what Jubilees says. And okay, we'll look at the next account, and that's found in the book of Jasher, book of the upright. And it's here in chapter 21, and it's verse 14. It says here, Ishmael came to Isaac. This is says Isaac was 5 years old. Ishmael was a lot older. It says 14 years old. 14 when Isaac was born. So that would make him 19. So Isaac is 5, Ishmael is 19 years old. That's the setup here. Verse 14 of chapter 21 says, Ishmael came to Isaac and seated himself opposite to him. And he took the bow and arrow, obviously, but it says the bow, and drew it and put the arrow in it. Okay, it says arrow. And intended to slay Isaac. He wanted to kill him. And Sarah saw the act which Ishmael desired to do to her son Isaac, and it grieved her exceedingly on account of her son. And she sent for Abraham and said to him, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for her son shall not be heir with my son, for thus did he seek to do unto him this day. So that's what Jasher says. So just using logic, common sense, and in my humble opinion, what scenario is more likely? Is it scenario A, sexual molestation? Is it scenario B, where she was jealous because Ishmael was dancing? What kind of dancing was he doing in that case? Or is it scenario C, which I think is most likely, that he, in our modern vernacular, did this? That's the thumbnail I'm going to use. and he's relatively, I don't know, maybe not a teenager, but he's older, definitely. And this kid is at least 5, and he's pulling a gun on him, intending to kill him, whether serious or not. But it says he was intending to kill Isaac in the text of Jasher. So, in my humble opinion, that's what it was. Because you don't kick out somebody, and you don't agree with your wife to kick out your biological son and her mistress, or I would say her handmaid, because of dancing. Maybe molestation, possibly, but again, that's speculation. It says nowhere in the text that that's what happened, although sporting people may interpret it that way. Personally, I don't feel that that is true because Abraham would have noticed it. Abraham would not have taught Ishmael to do that. That's not something, a tree is known by its fruit. He wouldn't do that. Whereas, yes, I mean, men and boys tend to have, violent tendencies. So that I think that's the most likely scenario. So that's that situation there, dealing with that verse 9, as to what happened. Verse 11 then describes a fallout, or Abraham's mental disposition at that time. It said the word from Sarah appeared very hard before Abraham, versus the MT saying very grievous. I think it was more difficult than grievous, because grievous sounds to me like he was mourning, like he was very sad and depressed. Whereas it's just very hard. It's a difficult decision to make. It's a dilemma. Like, whose side do you take? Verse 13 says, I will make the son of this bondwoman a great nation, your son. A great nation. MT says a nation, doesn't say great, initially at least. Verse 14 says that Abraham rose up in the morning, as opposed to early in the morning. So we're not sure what time it is. I'm assuming it is early, probably between 6 to 9. Took loaves and a skin of water. So they carry the water in skins instead of a bottle. And gave to Hagar. And he put the child on her shoulder. So notice that he put the child only on her shoulder. He didn't stack bread and stack water and put all of that on her shoulder, and like the Flintstones, piling on top of the roof, like all these brontosaurus ribs. He's not doing that. He only gave her the child. Probably, maybe she's carrying it in a backpack. I don't know. But he put the child on her shoulder. So I'm not sure how a 19-year-old can go on her shoulder. Maybe he wasn't 19 after all. I don't know, but it says that he's on her shoulder. And you know what? Maybe that's the saying. Maybe it's just on her shoulder. When you're driving on the shoulder, maybe he put her at her side and he was carrying the rest of the supplies. It's hard to say, really. Anyhow, 14 says, she departed, wandered in the wilderness near the well of the oath. So Beersheba, that might be just a translation of what it means. Well of the oath. Continuing on, we have verse 15. She put Ishmael under a fir tree versus shrubs. So a fir tree is a tall tree which will be shaded. Shrubs are an undergrowth. They're not very tall. You can't really get shaded under those unless they're really tall, but fir tree makes more sense. You would get shade from that, and that she would put him under that. The child cried in verse 16. The child cried aloud and wept, versus, and she lifted up her voice and wept. So did Ishmael cry, or was it Hagar? Well, Septuagint says it was the child, it was Ishmael who was crying, and I would agree. Verse 21, he dwelt in the wilderness. Let's just scroll down a little bit. He dwelt in the wilderness. This is Ishmael dwelling in the wilderness. And his mother took him a wife out of Paran of Mizraim. So Paran or Paran is of Egypt. It's a district of Egypt. Whereas in the MT it says he lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his wife came from the land of Egypt. So different story going on there. Verse 22, we have this character of Ochozat or Ochozat, who was the friend of Abimelech, and Phicol was the chief captain of his host, Abimelech's host. In the MT, we see that that character Ochozat doesn't exist. He's been wiped out. His name has been omitted. Verse 23, that you will not injure me. So this is Abimelech saying, swear to me, you will not injure me, nor my seed, nor my name, so his reputation, but according to the righteousness which I have performed, you will deal with me. The MT says, don't deal falsely with me, don't lie to me, don't deceive me, nor my son, nor my son's son, which encapsulates seed, but according to the kindness that I have done to you. So we see here that injury is a big difference than just, dealing falsely. You can injure someone by dealing falsely, but injure can mean just, physically as well, but in any way injure. Dealing falsely is a more specific way to injure somebody. But we notice here that his name is mentioned. Don't injure my reputation. Whereas here it doesn't say that. And according to the righteousness, where it says kindness. So it's a little different in terms of the wording there. Verse 25 says, he reproved Abimelech because of the wells of water. Where it says that he reproved him because of a well of water. So is it one well or many wells? I think that I'm leaning towards the opinion that Abraham is a reasonable man. He wouldn't be up in arms over one well. He'd probably let it go. But many wells of water, I think that's excessive. How can you let that go? You have to stand your ground. And it says here, what do they do, the wells of water? Well, they have done this thing to you. 26. Abimelech says, I know not who has done this thing to you. So someone did something to Abraham regarding these wells of water. But in the MT, it says, I don't know who has done this thing. So he's not saying it's against Abraham. It's just this thing. Someone did something. No, they did it to Abraham. Abraham's the victim in this situation. He's the one who's been taken advantage of regarding the wells of water. They were his wells. Moving on to 33, it's the last verse of this chapter. We read here, field. Abraham planted a field at the well of the oath and called there on the name of Jehovah. Versus Abraham planted a grove. A field is much different than a grove. A grove, if you look it up, is a small wooded area with little to no underbrush. So, because groves have a pagan connotation, a field makes more sense. That he would plant a field, and yeah, he'll call on the name of Jehovah there in that place, Beersheba, at the well of the oath. Versus a grove. I don't think Jehovah commands anyone to build a grove to worship him. In fact, a lot of the groves were made for other Elohim, which I won't name their names, but those groves had to be destroyed. Those were, where the people committed idolatry. The Israelites, at one point, were worshiping under every green tree, under groves and all these things. So I just dismiss that what the MT is telling us, that it's a grove he planted, whereas I believe it is a field, as the Septuagint is telling us. So that's all I have for today on this chapter. Thank you for watching. Jehovah bless you and make your way prosperous. Next time, we'll look at Genesis chapter 22.